Hey, you. Yes, you. I don't know what you're doing, but this video, maybe it's something for you. Alrighty. Book talk. It's everywhere. It's inescapable at this point. You go to any bookstore and there it is, staring back at you. That little neat stand with popular books on BookTok. After so many years of it being an actual thing, I would assume that I'm in a position where I don't have to explain it. It's also very much in the name, but it's been making these huge waves in the publishing industry, especially after the pandemic. So many books that were published even back in 2012, 2013, 2016, especially those, and close to 2018, 2019, they have been making a resurgence. And it's a resurgence of a lifetime where millions of copies even started being sold of these books that were published, some of them almost a decade ago. And that's only because they were getting a lot of hype on BookTok. And that to me, in and of itself, is insane. I think BookTok can be sometimes a handful, just like with everything in life when you take too much. But by itself, BookTok is an interesting place, and it's a place where readers and authors themselves get to share their love of books, and they get to express a lot of emotions behind those books, and they get to find niche communities and they share that same admiration for different books. I have chosen BookTok staples, you might say, that for a lot of these years, since 2020, they have been pushed on everyone's feeds, it felt like at least. I have nailed down those four culprits, let's say, which I have actually never read. What we're doing on the channel, say it with me, we critique. And at the end, we'll get to rate them and crown the Bookest of BookTok. And I'm really excited about that because I don't know what to expect. You never know. Maybe we'll get surprised. And let's just get on with my picks for this video. First up, VERITY by Colleen Hoover. You know I had to. I couldn't have a book talk video without having Colleen Hoover in here. She's the designated queen of book talk. I remember reading from my university that at one point her books sold more than the Bible. And I've chosen something of hers that is also very different from what she usually puts out there, because we know VERITY is a suspense thriller with a love story. I have read to this point 4 other Colleen Hoover books. So let's say that I'm well versed into how she writes her characters and her world and all of that. What I'm not so well versed in is in the author herself, because something pricked my ear about her being in hot waters recently. I don't really know a whole lot about it, so I'll just be brushing past it. But if you know more about it, just leave it down in the comments and I'll read it. My second pick for this challenge is still a love story, but different. The Song of Achilles by Madeline. This is her debut novel. And then Circe, which is also about Greek mythology, but from the perspective of a goddess. I've read that one and I was really engaged with it. I actually have high hopes for the Song of Achilles. The third book that I'll be reading in this video is They Both Die at the End by Silvera. Now this one is published in 2017, but again, it follows that book talk trend of beautiful homosexual romance. And yeah, I'm all up for all of these books. And last, but certainly not least, we have Caraval by Stephanie Garber. These are my picks for this video. They're all very popular in their own right, and we shall see which one of these is the best, in my opinion. they both die at the end. I did, in fact, actually already started reading it, and it was a while back, and I think I've only read 2 chapters. The thing that surprised me about it was that nobody told me that this thing, it's speculative. I really like the cover of it, and I think it's because it has a lot of meaning behind it. I do love symbolism. I'm one who likes symbolism in all things. You have the 2 of them, but then you also have death. So obviously there's death on the bottom made out of their shadows, and then it's death in the sky. So it's like they cannot hide from death, which is very on theme, I think, after reading 2 chapters. But at the end of this video, I will have read the whole novel. So guess what? Then I could talk about it. So far, I've read 34 pages. Not a lot. What I've gotten from this story so far is that it's very juvenile, and I don't mean it in a bad way, because we're dealing with these 2 boys that are very young. So this is definitely young adult. You can sense it. You can feel it from the writing style, from the way the characters are talking, how they're thinking. It is very subjective. It's first person, and it's definitely written in this dialogue style. It's almost like you are in their heads and they're talking to themselves. So you become this version of themselves, like the inner voice, and they're talking to this inner voice to explain something. But there are times when I think it gets a little bit confusing. If you are taking the stance of, oh, these are characters that they're talking to themselves and not like this third person, then why would they be explaining to themselves the things that they already know because they're living in this reality? You get my drift? I really like how the 2 boys react differently, and I really like, again, this aspect, this real tangible aspect of humanity, of we are humans because we are not eternal, we die. But then again, it's so complicated and it's so complex to deal with the knowledge that you're going to die. And this is something real. It's something that we're all dealing with, but it's like it's umped to the thousands because you know exactly when you're going to die. You just don't know how. So you're starting to speculate and you're starting to get, the sense of anxiety and panic that anything could get you. Something else I like about the structure of the story and the premise of the story, it's Hitchcock's bomb. You know these characters are going to die. You know it from the title, which is very much eye-catching, but you also know it from the story right now because you're getting these reassurances of this is happening, they are going to die. I think it's going to be very interesting how readers are going to internalize the whole experience. Once you get into a story and once you get reading it, you get more context to the characters, you start to like them and you start to root for them. There's always that sense of hope that maybe things are going to be different. You want them to actually be able to cheat there. That's the story that we're all hoping for internally. And I really, really want that to not happen. And I think that's not going to happen because it makes for a more poignant experience. And it also reminds me of stories like Chernobyl, the TV series, where you're dealing with something that it's inevitable. You're almost like on pins and needles of everything that's happening because you know how the story is going to end. And I really, really like this angle for stories. I think it's so unique and it's so interesting and it creates so many conflicting feelings in those engaging with these stories and it makes them memorable. This is my analysis so far and we're going to go back into reading. I'm actually getting some vibes from the story, I'm not gonna lie. You know what time it is. Also, fun fact. We have a fellow reader with us. Yeah, he's super chill. And I'm back. VERITY was published in 2018, but has been making its round on BookTok, especially in 2022. And one thing about this book that was literally in every video was its plot twist at the end. And I'll talk about that in a minute because obviously everybody talked about it, so I might as well just do it too. But there were also other things in the book that caught my eye. One thing that I can say for certain about Colleen's style of writing is that it's actually very straightforward, and because of that, it's very easy to read. One reason why she's so popular on this app is because of this. Everyone, no matter the educational background, let's say, can engage with her books and they can find some pleasure from that. They're also good foreshadowing moments in the novel. Now, on to everything else. On many occasions while reading it, I found it very difficult to visualize what Colleen was describing. One of her biggest culprits for that is her relying so much on reversed causality just for shock value. A typical story has cause and effect. In reverse causality, you obviously reverse those. And not once, not twice, but on so many occasions in the story that happened. And usually this is a no-no because you can get people confused. I was confused. Now, don't get me wrong, all writing rules are there for a reason, but with a precise intention behind them, they can also be broken for different effects. I thought the romance lacked the natural sweetness to it, the genuine emotion that could reinforce Lowen's and Jeremy's relationship, but most of all balance and control the tension of the sex. But I left it for last, the one thing that everybody was raving about. And that in of itself should tell you a lot about my opinions on the final twist, because I found it astonishingly contrived. It hinged so much on it having that final twist that will shock you to the bone that it felt a little bit condescending. It just made no sense, mainly used for that shock value without having proper substance to back it up. Song of Achilles it's such a beautiful lyrical experience. Most of the times that I'm reading books, I'm seeing them in my head as movies. But this is one of those unique cases where I will highly recommend everyone just reading it purely because of the beautiful prose. It reads as highly introspective at times and detached time-wise. Retrospective writing is also used in Circe to beautiful degrees. So if you have read this, or plan to read it, then know that Miller's other book, Circe, is pretty much similar on that note. So one thing that I noticed, which is not actually a bad thing, but I just noticed it, was the amount of passive verbs, which again, in writing, it's usually not something that you would want purely because you want the readers to feel very much in the story, and one way to do that is by using active verbs to, grab their attention. But in this case, I think the passive verbs did beautifully to create that detachment from the situation, from the character's point of view. It enables the stylistic detachment and the lyricism that it's so contingent upon. My only gripe with this story is that at times, there were inconsistencies in the changes of verb tenses from past to present and vice versa. They both die at the end. This one was actually incredibly similar with the Song of Achilles. You have the emotional, beautiful and vivid description behind it. What I loved about this book was how it manages to distill human emotion. The mix of optimism, joy, sadness, and frustration. Matteo and Rufus have a unique dynamic. They both share a sense of guilt and they challenge each other, which is again very fun to witness. And it's especially good that those changes that were happening internally for both of them were shown externally too. Remember that bomb I mentioned? While a fake climax in the story, it still provided a palpable sense of tension and suspense, which I'm all for. Everything, and I mean everything, comes full circle in the end. And the bookend effect gives off that sense of satisfaction and magnitude. Even when the whole story is about exploring a microcosm created by Matteo's and Rufus's lives. I'll be honest with you, I cried, okay? But I didn't cry while reading it. I didn't even cry when I finished it. I cried after I finished the book, and for the entirety of the day, I just kept thinking of it. I must have cried because I connected a lot with the themes and the elements of the story. The story's essence, tragic and beautiful at the same time. And last, we have Caraval, which, if you've come to this portion of the video, you will know that I completely forgot to record. There were so many things happening with this book that after I finished it, I just took some time off. And then when I came back to it, to kind of like analyze everything and try to make some sense of all the things that I was thinking of, all my thoughts, I was also thinking like, is it really worth it? And you get to understand my conflicting emotions behind it. We don't want to talk about the things that are happening in this book. But the gist of all my thoughts was just how generic the story felt. The protagonist and everyone else, they act so childish at times that it's hard to take them seriously. I also found it actually difficult to remember some things, and that to me is also like a big problem because it's so generic and it's also very forgettable. But one thing that I can still to this day vividly recall while reading it was my total dissatisfaction at just the amount of plot twists that are happening in the novel. These are thrown in the story at random places, at times they just don't make sense structurally to be there. And they're thrown left and right like there's no tomorrow. Just so you know, there were so many plot twists in the novel that at one point, just nothing made sense. Nothing in a sense of logical sense. Some of them negate everything that you've witnessed to that point. And that's certainly not how you create an effective plot twist. A plot twist should give you more nuance to the story. What I'm telling you is not what happens in this book. And another big qualm I have with the story is because it relies heavily on one of my pet peeves at this point. And that is when you have all of this, beautiful, fun, thrilling stuff happening, but it's outside the POV. So I'm like, I want that fun stuff. Why aren't you giving me the fun stuff? I'm here for that fun stuff. And I'm also looking at you, Sarah J. Maas. I'm looking at you. And the majority of the second half of Caraval is exactly that. And I just, especially when it comes to endings, I just cannot stand that. By me watching all of these people online talk about this book, I saw a lot of them comparing it to The Night Circus. I was sold this enchanting tale of disillusion and mystery and pretense. And while The Night Circus itself is not a favorite of mine either, you'd be much better off with it if you're into all of these vibes. And with me talking about Caraval, I hope I'm not coming across as mean, because that's just never my intention. But what's there is there, I will say, however, there were some instances when I was reading it and I was thoroughly enjoying myself, but then I got the plot twist, which pretty much invalidated all of those experiences. So there's that. Now, the one that I least liked, for all the reasons that we talked about, is Caraval. And I'm gonna put it at 1.5, which makes it the bottom place. A little bit better, but not by much. We have VERITY, which I'll place above Caraval with a 2.5 rating. I think both Song of Achilles and They Both Die at the End are amazing pieces of literature. They're great. I think everyone should at least try to read them. And I think everyone that has read them have pretty much enjoyed them as much as I did. So I cannot put them one above the other, as I'm giving both of them 5 out of 5. Let's just split the crown. Who cares? They are both good. So there it is, my ranking for this video of me reading popular books on BookTok. Thank you all so much for watching my video out of every other video in the YouTube sea. Until next time, I told you it was something.